Throughout its existence, the land of the pyramids and the pharaohs has accumulated a great many mysteries. Although excavations are constantly being conducted in Egypt, many discoveries and artifacts only raise more questions than they give answers. This is Infinity, and today you'll learn about the artifacts of Egypt that scientists still can't explain. A mummy wrapped in a mysterious message. Mummification in Egypt began around 2800 BC. Archaeologists continue to find mummies to this day. Of course, such findings cannot do without mysteries and riddles. For example, in 1881 in Luxor, the mummy of a screaming woman was found. It's also known as the Screaming Mummy. It immediately caused interest among specialists because the body was in an unusual position for a mummy. Bent, crossed legs, head turned to the right, and mouth wide open. Only recently the researchers were able to figure out that the woman died of a heart attack. The sudden death was caused by severe atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries, and in the process of embalming, it was decided to leave the woman's body position as it was. But this wasn't the only mummy with a mystery. In 1948, a simple shopkeeper from Alexandria sold the sarcophagus with the mummy of the woman to Melaho Barik. He used it as an exhibit in his house and showed it to all comers. He had no idea how valuable the mummy was. It had been on display for decades, but one day the owner decided to remove some frayed bandages. He removed the linen strips and placed them in a separate display case. That's when everyone started to say that the mummy was wrapped in the pages of a book and it wasn't written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. They reasoned only that it was some other script. But what was it? Even when the experts were able to assemble the strips in the correct order, the written text couldn't be translated. Scholars were only able to understand a small number of words. This gave the slightest indication of the Liber Lentius, or Book of Agram. Based on the dates and the names of the gods found in the text, it's believed that the Liber Lentius was a religious calendar. But why did they wrap a dead body in these pages? And how did the Etruscan book end up on an Egyptian mummy? It's been suggested that the deceased was from a wealthy Etruscan family that fled to Egypt and was there for some time. This may have happened in the 3rd century BC, or during the period when the Romans were conquering the Etruscan territory. Then it was the norm for all rich foreigners who died in Egypt, so the young woman was embalmed before her burial. And the fact that she was wrapped in the Etruscan book can be explained as part of the Etruscan burial custom, as a memorial left for the dead. But one of the main problems was still not solved by these assumptions. Where and why did the embalmers get the linen strips with the text of another script for wrapping when they prepared this woman for the afterlife? Colossi of Memnon. The Colossi of Memnon are two giant massive stone statues. They stand on the west bank of the Nile, near the modern city of Luxor. The Colossi of Memnon are made of heavy-duty quartzite. They reach a height of 18 meters, and each statue weighs 700 tons. Moreover, these statues rest on a quartzite pedestal which weighs 500 tons. Unfortunately, today these twin statues are just ruins. But you can imagine how impressive these structures were for nearly 3,500 years. On the site once stood a grandiose temple of Pharaoh Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty. The temple unfortunately did not survive to this day, and the scale of construction under this ruler can only be judged by the statues. As for them, there's an assumption that these statues depict him, but time and the elements have spared nothing. The faces are too badly damaged to say it with 100% certainty. But if the silent twin statues depict the Egyptian ruler Amenhotep III, then why the statues are called the Colossi of Memnon? After all, this is the Greek name and it has nothing to do with ancient Egyptians. It appeared when the first Greeks arrived here. They asked what the statues were, and the locals replied Mena. That was usually the name given to the statues of the sitting pharaohs. But the Greeks, for some reason, began to associate these statues with Memnon, who was the king of Ethiopia. The most interesting thing is that studies of the structure of the stone of the twin statues showed that the blocks were mined either in Giza or at El Gabar El Amar. That means that those who moved the blocks had to go a distance of almost 700 kilometers. How could the ancient Egyptians transport them over such a distance? After all, the devices for moving had to withstand the weight of at least 500 tons. It's a big mystery how they managed to do this. What else have scientists failed to fully explain about the land of the pharaohs? Stay tuned to learn about the mysterious Dendera light, the glass of Egyptian statues, and the labyrinth, which is still a legend and a mystery in Egypt. Dendera light. The Dendera light is a motif in the Hathor Temple at Dendera in Egypt. The drawings are applied to the walls of the lower levels of the temple. They got their name for a reason. Externally, they look like discharge lamps, so some researchers are convinced that it's an electric light with a glass bulb that's shown on the bas-reliefs. Also, in their opinion, the room is given instructions on how to use the device because all the free space is written with small hieroglyphs. Egyptologists believe that the ancient Egyptians used electric lamps deep underground to illuminate rooms where sunlight couldn't penetrate. This theory is supported by the fact that no soot from burning torches was found on the walls and ceilings of the sacred rooms. But is this possible? It turns out that the ancient Egyptian engineers were able to produce electricity and had high-voltage current sources, right? By the way, there's an assumption that the ancient Egyptians did not discover the phenomenon of electricity themselves. It's believed that they were taught it by representatives of other civilizations. The ancient Egyptians used the electric energy, but they never were able to master the true principles of its action because the science was at a low level of development at that time. However, the official version of Egyptologists interprets the objects depicted in bas-reliefs as a combination of the lotus flower, the jed, a symbol of stability symbolized by outstretched arms, and the snake rising from the lotus and signifying abundance, which is associated with the annual Nile flood. Crystal glass eyes. Another mystery, which has not yet been fully solved, is the eyes of some Egyptian statues, or rather the secret of making them from small fragments of rock crystal. These lenses were usually placed in the eye sockets of statues made of wood or limestone. What's most striking here is the skill with which these lenses were made. The quality of the lenses is so high that it suggests that they were created with machine work and specialized lathes and grinders. The most striking example of such sculptures is the statue of Pharaoh Hor I, made of wood. The eyes of Pharaoh Hor I are very realistic. They look either blue or smoky gray depending on the angle of illumination. Moreover, they even imitate the capillary structure of the retina. Studies conducted by Professor J. Enoch at the University of California, Berkeley, showed just a striking similarity of these lenses with the shape and optical properties of the human eye. The American researcher believes that Egypt reached the greatest skill in lenses processing around 2500 BC, and that such a remarkable technology was used less and less often and then was lost. The only reasonable explanation is that the Egyptians got quartz blanks for eye models from somewhere, so the technology lived. When the reserves ran out, the technology also ran out. By the way, such lenses were inserted not only into the eyes of pharaohs, but also into the eye sockets of animals. Here's an example of a cosmetic vessel in the shape of a cat. The lenses are made of rock crystal and bordered with copper. The Lost Egyptian Labyrinth. 2,500 years ago, the Egyptian rulers created a huge labyrinth. It was mentioned by many ancient authors: Herodotus, Strabo, Diodorus, Siculus, and Pliny the Elder. In size and grandeur, the labyrinth was even bigger than the famous Egyptian pyramids. The labyrinth was 2 stories high, and inside there were 300 different rooms. They were connected by such complex winding paths that it was impossible to find the way out without a guide. There were a great many relief images on the walls and in the transitional parts. Its underground level served as a tomb for the pharaohs, and the massive roof was made of only one giant stone. Ancient papyri stated that the central entrance to the labyrinth were inscribed the words, "Madness or death is what the weak or the vicious find here. Only the strong and the good find life and immortality here." But today there's nothing left of such a majestic complex, at least on the surface. Now there are only legends, and scientists have no way to find traces of the mysterious labyrinth. The most similar thing that one group of researchers has found is a massive stone structure under the surface which could be the base of the labyrinth. The discovery took place in 2008. However, no start was made on the excavation of what could have been Egypt's greatest archaeological wonder. That's all, guys. What artifact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you later.